For centuries, everyone thought alchemists were trying to turn lead into gold. They weren't. It was a cover story, because the real pursuit would have gotten them burned alive. The lead was human ignorance. The gold was ancient wisdom. And the system they were protecting contains 7 laws that claim to explain everything. Your emotions, your habits, why your good intentions keep failing, and why some people seem to move through life differently than others. This is the Kybalion. Professor Lucia Helena Galvão has taught these laws for decades. She doesn't ask you to believe them. She asks you to look. Here's what she found.
That image was most likely created by the alchemists themselves. Why? To escape the Inquisition. Transforming lead into gold wouldn't get you burned at the stake. Ambition was perfectly acceptable. But the pursuit of Egyptian wisdom, unforgivable. So Hermeticism had to be hidden, behind the appearance of scientific studies, physical experiments, things that wouldn't face resistance. So you see, the lead they wanted to transform into gold was the lead of ignorance into the gold of wisdom.
The first law is the foundation of all the others. It's called mentalism, and it says something that sounds impossible until you hear this.
There's a thinker, Fritjof Capra, who writes a fascinating book about the holographic universe, where he talks precisely about the impossibility of things emerging chaotically into the world without first coming from a mental plane, from the plane of ideas within the universe. And he gives an example I find hilarious. He says, take your computer, throw it down the stairs. The computer goes bouncing down the steps. Let's say you had an old model, a Pentium. And by sheer chance, because the computer fell down the stairs, the parts rearranged themselves inside so that when it reached the bottom, it had become a brand new Apple, a Macintosh. Of course, people would line up to throw their computers down that staircase. And you know this will never happen. It's absurd. Now, do you think the universe is less complex than a Macintosh?
The universe is more complex than any computer ever built. And if a computer can't upgrade itself by falling downstairs, what does that tell you about how all of this got here? The Hermetics had an answer, a directing mind, not as metaphor, as law. The second law was inscribed on the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, arguably the most famous sentence in the history of mysticism. 4 words, and they describe everything.
When it comes to correspondence, it's also very easy to perceive. There are countless examples, and you'll probably think of things far more diverse and better than these poor, simple examples I'm giving. Imagine, for instance, the principle of the center. Countless galaxies spinning around the Virgo cluster, including the local group where we live. Then, within our own galaxy, everything spinning around a center. Within the solar system, everything spinning around a center. And you realize that inside us, psychologically, emotionally, it's exactly the same thing. From the point of view of the mind, of the meaning of life, there is a center, what you want to become. I'm not talking about standards of success or achievement or any of that, but the human being you want to become at the end of it all. What you want to see when you stand before the conclusion of your work in the world, the construction of yourself. If you've been very firm, with very firm principles, and you know the message you want to give the world, how much you want to benefit life, how much you want to add to human existence, that is a center, and you feel that all your actions become coordinated. Everything revolves around it. You don't lose yourself. Disoriented is the person who no longer knows where north is.
She's not talking about career goals. She's asking something deeper. Do you know what kind of person you're trying to become? Because without that center, all your movement is just elegant chaos. The third law says everything is in motion. Nothing rests. From the densest rock to the most fleeting thought, it's all vibration at different frequencies. Modern physics confirmed this in the 20th century. The Hermetics wrote it 3,000 years earlier. But here's the part no one taught you.
Your entire being must be at the same level. I recently spoke to you about The Lion King. Perhaps you didn't stop to notice an interesting element in that film. Of that entire complex plot, with all the disasters that happened, who is truly to blame? Everyone will say, it's Scar. No, it's not Scar. Scar had his character flaws from birth. It was predictable. Everyone could see it. The real responsibility belongs to Mufasa. Do you know why? Because he let evil live in the heart of good. He exposed his entire kingdom to danger, including his own son, because he made a concession for purely personal reasons, which is unacceptable for a king. He let evil live in the heart of good. So this question of having very low vibrations living inside higher vibrations, life will eventually create a middle ground. It will pull you down. The principle of vibration asks that you stay in tune with what's around you. What do I enjoy? Things that make me reflect. Things that inspire me to be a better human being. Things that show me the need to dedicate myself more to the purpose of my life. Things that bring me a state of harmony, of peace. I enjoy things that elevate me. Oh, but there's this one little exception. Well, that little exception will generate consequences in your life.
Think about the things you tolerate in yourself, the small compromises, the habits you know aren't right but haven't removed. Under pressure, that's what surfaces. Not your best self, your tolerated self. The fourth law says opposites don't exist. Hot and cold, love and hate, courage and fear. They're the same thing at different degrees, and it comes with a warning.
Imagine something as simple as a thermometer. If you look at a gradient of temperatures, hot and cold are identical in nature, but different in degree. Isn't that so? Within a thermometer, it's very difficult for you to tell me where hot begins and cold ends. You need a reference point, and what is that? Human body temperature? Above that is hot, below is cold. But if you look at the temperature gradient as a whole, there is no hot or cold. They're simply different degrees of a single reality, temperature. And when things share the same nature, the same substance, and differ only in degree, it's not difficult to reverse one into the other. You cannot reverse things that are different, but things of the same nature can be reversed. Laziness into action, criticism into discernment, hatred into love. They're all things of the same nature, simply at different degrees of vibration. When they're within the same gradient, you can reverse them. Just as a fever reducer reverses the temperature of someone with a fever, there is a knowledge that can generate in a person what the Hermetics call neutralization.
That sounds theoretical until you see what it does to real people.
Of course, there are always exceptions, but you see sometimes, on the very first class of a philosophy course, there's a person who's vibrating, overflowing with enthusiasm. I'm going to spend my whole life here. Easy now. Bring your things slowly, everything with balance. We don't need things. We just need you to grow. Be careful with that, because within a week, it's likely that enthusiasm will cool and swing to the other extreme. The person who climbs more calmly, who perhaps reaches that level of excitement on the 20th class, when the course is nearly ending, that's the one who has the chance to build something steady and lasting. I know these sudden passions are a source of pleasure, but they aren't a solid foundation for something you intend to commit your life to. It's neither wise nor sustainable. The key is to hold back the passion a little and build an entire foundation beneath it.
New Year's resolutions, crash diets, relationships that start with, "I've never felt this way before." The fourth law predicts exactly what happens next. The fifth law is called rhythm. Everything swings. Action and reaction, rise and fall, inhale and exhale. But the Hermetics discovered something remarkable, a way to step off the pendulum. And you've already experienced it. You just didn't know it was an ancient technique.
And they no longer affect you. The same thing. I've observed this in sporting events. When you don't root for any of the teams playing, when it's not your country and you feel no emotional involvement, you evaluate the skill of the game far better. You see the beauty of technique more clearly. You have a cooler head to appreciate the ability, the artistry. Because passion isn't present. When passion is there, you identify with one side, and you no longer see quality, you no longer see talent. Yours is better, and the others must be defeated.
The Stoics called this the view from above. The Buddhists call it detachment. The Hermetics were practicing it thousands of years before either tradition existed. And it starts with one question. Can you watch your own life without rooting for a side? The sixth law is the one most people resist because it says there are no accidents. Every effect has a cause. Every present moment is a harvest of something you planted.
All things happen according to the law. Chance is simply a name given to an unrecognized law. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. In other words, if you want to change the future, generate different causes right now. Helena Blavatsky used to say, "It's no use asking the gods to spare you from consequences whose causes you have already generated. Because if gods exist, they became great precisely by respecting the laws of nature. And even they cannot override karma. But the simplest of beings can change their causes, so they don't suffer the same consequences again." In the field of causes, we all have power. In the field of consequences, we no longer do. What does the Christian Bible say about this? Sowing is free, but the harvest is mandatory. If you planted wheat, don't cry at harvest time because you wanted soy. It's wheat. But you are free in the next sowing to plant whatever you wish. In the field of causes, we are free. In the field of consequences, we are bound. And if we understand this, we gain a sense of freedom and autonomy, because we are free to generate causes whose consequences are the ones we dream of for our future.
You are free to plant anything you want, but you are not free to choose what grows. The seventh and final law is the most disturbing. It's called gender, but it has nothing to do with biology. It's about where your thoughts come from and whether the beliefs you defend with your life were ever really yours.
He uses the example of the cuckoo's egg. Have you heard that this bird has a strange but very clever habit? It goes to the nests of other birds, pushes out all the eggs that are there, and places its own for other birds to hatch. Then this very strange chick is born, and the little birds can't understand what happened. It hatches another bird's eggs. It's pure cunning. They say that man is a syntax of nature. Everything that happens somewhere in nature also happens in man, as if he were a product. Teilhard de Chardin talks about this extensively. A product, a synthesis, of everything nature has elaborated up to that point. She synthesizes all of it in the human creation. So imagine this. An idea flashes in your mind. Just a flash. Then you take that idea and begin to feed it, develop it, work on it. And because you developed it and worked on it, you have the impression that you created it. You are the mother. It grew in your womb. But the element that fertilized it wasn't yours. Sometimes it was an idea from the collective unconscious. Sometimes it was someone's manipulation. Very subtly, someone reaches you and drops in a tiny little idea, this small. You create the nest for it, you feed it, you nurture it, you hatch the cuckoo's egg. You develop it, and because you cared for it and gave it birth, you have the impression, I am the mother, this is my idea.
So how do you know which thoughts are real? She has a technique.
You can even begin to create, and this is another good thing to keep in a journal, a jewelry box. What do you put inside the jewelry box? Thoughts and feelings that are truly yours. Cultivate them with great care. I believe this because I lived this experience, I reflected, and I arrived at this conclusion. And this is my idea. This feeling is genuinely mine. Do you know why? Because I looked at this person without any prejudice, without any herd mentality, without any trend. I observed their behavior for a while. I had the courage and the impartiality to do so, and I concluded that this person may not deserve hatred, but rather compassion. Maybe they don't deserve passion or worship, but simply a small measure of admiration or a great deal of understanding. In other words, the feelings that are yours, the thoughts that are yours.
In an age of algorithms, outrage, and borrowed opinions, knowing which thoughts are truly yours might be the most radical act of all.
Knowledge is like wealth intended for use. I take something seriously when I experience it and see that it has foundation. Before that, it's just a possibility, something that seems considerable and sensible to me. First, it's a possibility, then it's a confirmation, and that is how you reflect, how you learn, how you build an identity of your own.
7 laws, 2,000 years of hidden wisdom. The Kybalion doesn't ask you to believe. It asks you to look. Watch these laws play out in your morning routine, in the habits you tolerate, in the thoughts you never questioned. The Hermetics didn't ask for faith. They asked for observation. 7 laws, your own window. Start looking. From the teachings of Professor Lucia Helena Galvão, New Acropolis.